I learned somewhere along the way that the rest of the world may not view me as normal like everybody else or the way I was born. But it never felt that way to me. So I learned an early lesson that just because you're different doesn't mean you're abnormal. It's just what makes us us. And that's how I view the world.
Welcome to Finding Family DNA, the show about finding and connecting birth families with LA Morning News anchor Chris CHOBO and Jay Rosenzweig, founder and CEO of birthparentfinder.com. And now, here's Chris and Jay.
Hi, everybody. You're watching Finding Family DNA with Chris and Jay. I'm local Los Angeles news anchor Chris CHOBO, and you are.
I am Jay Rosenzweig, the founder and CEO of birthparentfinder.com. And before we get started today, I want to remind our audio listeners to please rate and review the podcast. It helps new listeners find us. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We want to get as many YouTube followers as we can so we can continue this podcast, Chris. Also, please help and support us by joining our Patreon. That's less than $5 a month, and we know that's less than a cup of coffee, right?
It really is. And we thank those who have joined. More and more people are doing that, and we truly appreciate you. And hopefully you enjoy the content we give you on Patreon, because it's like we go the extra mile to provide content that you would actually want. Like, you're like, what more could they talk about? And then we find things that we think are genuinely interesting. So please join our Patreon channel.
And also, Chris, with Patreon, the episode we did on the twins that were separated, we picked up a ton of Patreon subscribers because of that story, and they wanted to know more about our content.
And you just go back and look at all the extra Patreons there that you can sort through and find stuff that you find fascinating. Let's talk today about something that is both personal to you, but you get from time to time with your business, which is sperm donor finding. The assumed male, obviously, of someone who is in the world and they want to know more about their paternal side. Tell me about when you actually decide to take those cases and when you reject them.
It's very sensitive. It really is, because these are anonymous sperm donors.
And they do it for whatever reason. They want to help people who want to have a child but don't want necessarily all the attachment, whether it's emotional or physical, of having that person in their life. I'm sure there's a bazillion reasons, but they generally want to remain anonymous.
Right, and we will take these cases, and we've only had less than a handful, if they absolutely need medical history information. And in the 70s, if you went through a cryobank,
right,
they wouldn't give you that information,
right,
as far as mental health history, what diseases the donor had. That wasn't given back then. Now you get that. But we've had a couple cases where our client was a medical doctor, and she had some issues with physical issues.
Right.
And she said, I need to find who this person is. She took a DNA test, and we found the guy, also a medical doctor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of wild.
And he did not respond to my messages at all. So I'm going, what am I going to do? So being the investigator that I am, found out this guy had previously been married, divorced. I even looked at the divorce record to see how it went. So I contacted this guy's ex-wife, and she goes, I'm glad you called me, because he told me about this. He donated his sperm, and evidently several people had babies. But he would never, ever respond, he told me, ever. So what do you need from me? She gave me his entire medical history. I relayed it to my client, and she was so grateful.
Yeah.
And that's a prime example of why you would take those cases.
Because there's someone who needs that genuinely. It's not like, I wish, it'd be nice to know who my dad was. It's a medical necessity.
And also, you said the word dad. We don't refer to a sperm donor as a dad, because he's not your dad.
That's a good point. Because
a
a dad or a father is someone who's involved in someone's life.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that's controversial, too, because some people will disagree with that concept. They say, I want to find my father.
Right.
Well, did this guy have a relationship with your mother? And in these cases, he is an anonymous donor.
Excellent points all. So let's talk about one time you did help, or one time it's just been personal for you, and that is Annie Ross, who is with us today. Let's start from the basics. Hi, Annie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Jay or Annie, how do you know each other?
Annie is my niece. She is my sister's daughter, born in 1996 in Los Angeles. And by the way, I have nothing to do with finding relatives on this, just supporting her as a sperm donor baby.
Gotcha. Annie, hi.
Hello. Some would say we go way back.
Yeah. Since basically
Some would say,
forever, since your natural born life. So tell us, just as a fine person yourself, tell me about yourself in general, and then also how do you view the world as being someone who was a sperm donor baby?
That's a great question. So I'm Annie. I'm from LA. I live here now part-time. I go back and forth to the East Coast for work. I work in finance and technology, which I love. I also play violin. I consider myself an artist at the same time.
Kind of a
dedicated
big wow.
a good one. And I
Where'd you go to college?
where did I go to college? I went to New York University where I studied music.
Wow, huge,
And I
NYU.
Lived in New York for 8 years and then came on back to LA and loving it here. How do I view the world as a sperm donor baby? Being different is not abnormal. It's just the differences that we have that make us who we are.
Right.
I grew up never thinking anything strangely of my upbringing and the way I was born. And I learned somewhere along the way that the rest of the world may not view me as normal like everybody else or the way I was born. But it never felt that way to me. So I learned an early lesson that just because you're different doesn't mean you're abnormal. It's just what makes us us. And that's how I view the world.
Amen. And by the way, two of my daughters, and I know this is a different process, but two of my daughters, my older set, I have two sets of twins. One of my older set was in vitro fertilization, which I can't imagine is totally different than what your sister went through, right? Well,
it's different because the process is different.
Tell us about just growing up. I mean, what was your life like? Who was your father figure in your life here in Los Angeles?
Yeah. So I'll start with the second question. Father figure, easy. My grandfather, Jay's father.
My dad.
Yeah.
Abraham Rosenzweig. He actually lived in our guest house.
Nice.
Which was incredible. So that's a segue into what was my life like. I got to live with my grandparents, including my father figure, who was my grandfather, in my backyard, and they were bakers. They're Jewish bakers. So I always had the best treats. I would waltz over there looking for cookies, rummage through everything, and go about my business every single day. Or I'd hang out in there and play Scrabble and talk to my grandma and grandpa. And that was a huge part of my upbringing. And my upbringing in LA generally was amazing. I had a wonderful experience in schools that gave me great opportunities. It's where I learned about my love for music. I was able to carry that education and passion throughout a long life in LA until I turned 18 and left for New York. But living in LA with amazing examples of people who are actors and actresses and the best of the best in whatever they dream to do. I got to see those people as examples, and I learned a lot of lessons being here and living in LA. And I had an incredible experience in my household. I had two mother figures, if you will. There's my biological mom, Carla Ross, who gave me the gift of all the opportunities to learn music, learn about myself, which was amazing. If I ever wanted to put it down, my mom was always like, that's fine. Whatever you want to do next, I support you, which is incredible. And then Mari, a babysitter, if you will, but very much family to me, was in our house a lot of the time and helped my mom, who's a single mom because she went through sperm bank. She helped my mom in raising me, and so she's a mother figure to me as well. So I had a good situation. There were 4 like parental figures, you know.
Right, and Mari was been in your life since basically you were born.
Before she was helping out my mom a couple months before I was born. So also goes way back.
I love it.
Yeah, that's you have what we call priceless. Your relationship with your grandparents, and not all children have that, especially since they basically lived with you.
Yeah.
So that's just very special.
Absolutely. It's super special. I'm so grateful.
Was there ever a time in your life when you were younger where you're like, wouldn't mind knowing who my biological father was? Or was that ever a concern at all?
Yeah, but not because I actually wanted to know. There was a period of time where my life experience was all I ever knew, so that was normal, and I had no questions. I was like, oh, there's a guy out there who donated sperm, and I'm related to him. Great.
Which, let me stop you there. You always knew. It was never like, I was raised by white parents, so they told me right away. So there was, A, it was obvious, and B, it was always known, so it was never an issue. There was no ever surprise.
Right.
You're not really our biological kid. So for you always knew.
Always knew. As long as I can remember, I always knew.
Looking back, healthy?
Yes, yeah. Because that is that great lesson of I was, from my own perspective of my life experience, everything was normal. Everything was good. There was nothing strange about it.
Right.
And I got this lesson of the world reflecting on me. Well, that's odd. That's different, which did cause me to say, well, okay, everyone else thinks I should have a dad or know who my dad is, which catalyzed that season where I wanted to know. But that season eventually did come to an end, which gave me the lesson that's like, oh, the world can look at you different.
Right.
Now, do you refer to that person as your dad or the donor?
I refer to him as a donor. I say dad because people would reflect that on me.
Right.
So when I'm talking about other people's perspectives, I'm like, they wanted me to find my dad. They thought it was weird that I don't know my dad. But I don't think of him as a dad. I'm just like, there's this dude out there.
Who had no relationship whatsoever with your mom.
Not at all.
Have you ever sought that information, or if it were provided to you, is that something you'd want to know, or would you be like, I'm cool?
It was brought to me in that way. And I was like, sure, I'll know. I'm interested in knowing. I'm curious if it's available, but I'm not super compelled by it and wasn't super compelled by it.
All right, we're going to stop you there because we're going to talk more about that right after the break. You're watching Finding Family DNA with Chris and Jay and Annie. We'll be right back.
This is Jay Rosenzweig, the founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com. If you're looking to find your birth parents or anyone in your birth family, give us a call at 866-572-3463 or go to our website, BirthParentFinder.com. We're back with Annie Ross, who is my niece, my sister's daughter, and she is a sperm donor baby, born in 1996 in Los Angeles. And before the break, you talked about growing up in Los Angeles, being a sperm donor baby, your thoughts on that. And then we asked you about, were you interested in finding out more about the donor? And then what were your thoughts on that?
So when I was younger, I was interested because folks brought to my attention I was conceived in an interesting way. Eventually moved on from that season. It was maybe a year or two, if I'm remembering correctly, but lost interest. Eventually found siblings, which I'm sure we're going to get into. And some of them found out the identity of my sperm donor biological father, however you want to put it. And I was interested in seeing who he was, but it wasn't a life-changing moment in any way.
Which leads me to the first question. So so many questions all at once. Let me start with one before I forget. So do you know how many siblings through sperm donor procedures you have?
At least 25 right now.
Wow.
That's crazy. I don't know if they allow that anymore.
I don't think so. I think it's too many.
25, because it brings all kinds of moral questions into play, which are not necessarily bad questions. I mean, like
interesting.
Most people who go through sperm donors do it for a very specific reason that maybe there could be the man in the relationship can't provide usable sperm or whatever. I mean, there could be a million positive reasons, and so I don't necessarily. 25 is a lot. You know what I mean? It's a lot of people, because if I look at it from a financial, I'm like, that's a lot of people to be responsible for.
This is 28 years ago.
Yeah, I know, but you're not really responsible. How do you look at that? Just like that's what it was. That was the procedure.
I have all kinds of hypotheses. I wonder if he donated more than whatever the threshold was at the time. I think he donated to different sperm banks at the time, one of them being California Cryo, and I think there are a couple others. So I do wonder, are these tracked across entities? At the time, probably not. Now, I don't know. So I think there was a lot of opportunity to take advantage of the system, I think.
Right.
So I do question it.
Right.
And wonder, was the process totally sound the whole time?
Right. Which is, I think, you're being diplomatic. You're being diplomatic. You're like, it's not something I would have done. But no, I get a different time, and this is pre-internet where, everyone's opinion matters and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to work out all the questions that are in my head. So you have about 25, give or take, siblings out there. How did someone bring that to your attention?
It was my mom, actually, which is funny because I was an only child all my life. And I remember many times throughout my childhood being like, I want siblings and lots of animals. Both requests existed. And at some point when I was around 12, I remember my mom calling me into, I think it was her office at the time, if I'm remembering. And she was like, how would you feel if you had siblings? And I was like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Because I'd always wanted that. And she was like, well, I think you got a couple, and kind of explained the situation. And I was really excited. So was my mom. And she did it through, it was like the donor registry website.
So there's an entity out there that helps people who are donor children find out if there's a match out there. And so through that, you found out there were some. And then did you pursue that, or did you meet them?
Yeah. So my mom helped facilitate that, which was really cool.
How old were you again when this
I want to say 12.
Okay.
We can fact check that.
That's
But I want to say 12.
You might have been a little younger.
Yeah,
really?
That's preteen stuff. I mean, that's heavy duty. You may not have thought it at the time, but that's kind of heavy duty stuff.
For sure. But again, it's like the world looks at it as heavy duty sometimes, but I'm like, I've been asking for siblings forever. This is great. Like that was just the world through a kid's eyes is a fabulous thing. But so I did pursue them. My mom helped facilitate that. And we did, I believe the first reunion of the few that were on the site at the time was in San Francisco. And I remember meeting up in San Francisco, and we all had ADHD, and we bought those like popping things, and we were like throwing them all over the streets and just absolute being menaces.
Right.
We're like, yeah, this makes sense. It
Ah,
was really fun.
right.
Mhm.
And okay, again, so many questions. Do you look like each other, or do you feel like you look more like your mom? Did you see any similarities with how many did you meet?
So I've met 8 now.
Okay. So
And I'm connected with others online. So I know of like 25-ish. And I've met 8. And it's every couple of years there's like a new like set of
surprise.
friends. Yeah. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. But do I look like them? A few of them, yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 that I look a lot alike. And then some of them look more like each other.
And I've seen some of these pictures.
Yeah, they're
and
kind
some
of crazy.
Of them you look like full siblings.
Yeah.
Do you look like your mom?
I would also say I look like my mom. Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of cool.
Very much
Yeah.
so.
And I would actually say it to answer your question, I've seen a picture of the alleged sperm donor.
Right.
And I would say we do look a lot alike. And what's funny is I actually think, I think my mom and he looks like my mom, actually. They have like some similar features, so that's funny to
And
me.
we're going to save that for the Patreon.
Okay. Do you think that? And forgive me. Tell me if I need to save it for Patreon. Do you think that's why she picked him in some kind of way? Not necessarily just for the physical similarities. I mean, I'm sure he was very smart and this, that, whatever stuff you could tell people back then. I mean, but do you think that was a factor in why she chose him, or just no? Okay.
I think I know why she chose him. Well, one of the reasons why is all the nurses thought he was really good looking.
Well, that counts.
And there was a myth of a blue-eyed gene in our family, and my mom wanted to test that out and wanted to find a donor with blue eyes. And then all the folks that worked at California Cryo were like, this is a good-looking guy. And she was like, copy.
So now I'm looking at your eyes. Are they blue or green?
They
or
kind
like
of
in
shift
between?
colors.
Okay.
I don't know how that's possible, but they kind of shift.
I'm sure with light and all that kind of stuff, that's normal.
It's fair.
Was he tall?
Oh, I don't even know. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to actually
And I know
check.
your mom was provided with all that information.
Actually, I want to say he was. He was at least over 6 feet tall.
Right. They give you, like, when we have the adopted cases, they give you the non-identifying information of that person.
Yeah.
His age, approximately, what his interests were, his height, weight, eye color, hair color, and all that stuff.
All right. So again, back to my nonstop questioning about some of the things that I'm curious about with the donor and finding these people. So you were, I'm going to say, preteen when you started that process. Did that just kind of, is the donor registry how you have found most of the 8 that you've met, or did DNA, as DNA has exploded in popularity, has DNA, especially as we have learned, certain DNA sites are better than others? Ancestry is, I think we have found provides the most because more people use them than, say, 23andMe. They're both great, but Ancestry just has a larger database. So as you have reconnected now with 8, has DNA kind of enhanced and expanded that?
Certainly. The foundational pod of us, if you will, that found each other was, sizable at roughly 8, if I'm remembering correctly. But it was through Ancestry and making some connections there that over 25 were found. So absolutely.
Wow.
And I would say that the introduction of these DNA services obsolesced the sperm donor's ability to remain anonymous.
Right. Which was part of their foundational belief, right? It was like, I'm just helping somebody else, or I'm helping somebody else and making money, or I don't. Is there a financial component?
Yes.
Let me back up. I know there's a financial component to being a sperm donor, and I think there's a huge financial component for these high-end sperm donor companies and stuff like it's substantial. If you're like a rocket scientist and you're 6'5" and all these things, you can make a lot of money doing it.
You're paid thousands of dollars.
Yeah, well, like many thousands of
dollars.
Right, but not the
what you have to go through though.
Yeah.
During the process, you can't drink alcohol. Obviously, you can't do drugs. You have to watch your diet, and also you can't have sexual relations with anyone during that time.
And like, how long are we talking? I'm kidding. That's a joke. So the services have expanded. So when you say 25, that's just 25 that you know about because of the DNA services.
That's correct.
So it could be far above that number.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say it probably is. I don't know how far above that, but it's probably above that number of 25.
I would agree. I think it would be foolish to say we know 100% of us.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to take our second commercial break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the siblings more that you've met. And then also, are you interested in meeting the donor?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. You're watching Finding Family DNA with Chris and Jay and Annie. Family Tree Magazine provides information, inspiration, and community for those who want to discover, preserve, and celebrate their roots. Family Tree Magazine covers all areas of potential interest to family history enthusiasts, reaching beyond strict genealogy research to include ethnic heritage, DNA testing, family reunions, oral history, archival preservation, historic travel, and other surprises along the way. Family Tree Magazine provides engaging, easy-to-understand instructions to help genealogy enthusiasts research their past. Whether you're a beginner or a professional, there's something for everyone. Welcome back once again. You are watching Finding Family DNA with Chris and Jay and Annie. And we left off talking about, your siblings and finding them, at least 25 siblings or donor siblings. When you met them, cool people, just different life experiences?
Super cool people. Everyone was from a life situation, like totally different from one another for the most part. Like
right.
Lived in different states, just had really different life experiences, and all really cool people. There are a couple in particular who I have had some parallel pathing with, and we do have a lot in common and have more similar life experiences than others. There was one sibling who ended up going to NYU and living in New York.
That's bananas.
And we had a few really wild similarities, so really cool.
Are they in age anywhere close to you?
A couple years younger.
Could you have been at NYU at the same time?
No. It was like off by a year.
Oh, okay. That would have been bananas.
Really?
You know that Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other?
Yeah. You're like,
yeah. That could have been you two. You'd have been like, wait.
And this is now a tangent, but this did happen. So there was another sibling going to school in Fordham in the Bronx, so also in New York, and they met and crossed paths a couple times in that kind of a moment, which was
like, wow, you
kind
look
of
a
wild.
lot like me. That's bananas.
And wait a minute, didn't one of the siblings work in the neighborhood you lived in?
Oh. One of the siblings, so I went to Taft High School, are like either rival or sister high school, however you want to call it. It's like a close relationship between these two high schools. El Camino in the area. There is a sibling who's exactly my age and went to El Camino, and we absolutely crossed paths many times. And she works 2 blocks away from my childhood home in an office building there.
But you connected because of DNA.
Yep.
Wow. And would you? And this is not a judgment; it's just a question. Would you say you're reasonably close, or just like as close as you expect strangers who are related to be? I mean, how would you describe like some of the relationships? Obviously, some are tighter than others. How would you describe the nature of those relationships?
I think like that. I think some are tighter than others because it's all on an individual by individual basis. So the folks that I've had some overlap with, I'm much closer than folks that I haven't met yet. So it varies, but I would say it doesn't feel quite like I grew up with these folks and we are like traditional looking siblings that shared a household together. It doesn't feel that way.
Right.
But there is some kind of closeness that doesn't feel just like friends, that doesn't feel like you grew up with them. That's somewhere in the middle for me.
The donor sibling that also went to NYU blows my mind.
Me too.
Because I assume that person is from the Los Angeles area or no?
Chicago
area.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's the area that your mom and I grew up.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
That was another. It was like Jewish family in Chicago. Just interesting parallels.
Now, do you know if the donor was also Jewish? Was that a requirement that your mom had?
Irish Catholic.
Mm-hmm. So clearly it wasn't a requirement.
Right.
So when we talk about your siblings, obviously there'll be more revelations in the future. I would guess statistically someone else who may have also been a part of that who isn't really in that zone about, I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So are you ready for the possibility of additional donor siblings?
Always ready.
Right. It could be right around the corner, right?
I'm always ready. I'm like, give me that email, donorregistry.com. It's like, it's a gift that keeps, it's fun, actually. I think it's fun.
See, and I think that's a very normal and healthy way of looking at it. I mean, there's not, especially in today's society, there's no shame attached to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People need sperm donors for a variety of reasons. And so, but it was also pre-internet, which I think is fascinating because I think that the world has changed so much, even since 1996. I think the procedure has changed. I think probably the laws and rules and regulations. I don't know if you could. I don't know. I don't pretend to know if you could still have 50 children out there because of your donation. I mean, technically,
I don't know either.
Yeah, if there's nothing, if there's for lack of a better way of saying it, like basketball, no harm, no foul. If you're making people happy, I think that's probably the most important thing. Growing up, therapy, like, was there ever a time you're like, I'm different, even though it doesn't really matter, it kind of matters to other people, they're projecting it onto me? I think it's kind of like the direction or the verbiage you were using. The world cared, you didn't care, but the world seemed to care. Did that ever lead to any kind of therapy or need for a greater understanding outside of what your family could provide?
I think it was a part of it. I'm a very pro-therapy person, and when I was younger, I had ADHD and all kinds of things that led to always, as long as I can remember from like a really young age, having some kind of therapeutic support or support from a psychiatrist to help me through a lot of things. So yes, definitely, that was certainly part of the conversation, and it was very helpful.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Mm-hmm.
It's my family. And I've seen some of these go bad. And what we've talked about, NYU, your career, did you really expect your life to turn out like this with what you went through in life?
No. I mean, even just on the basis of like I graduated NYU with a music degree and somehow I'm in banking, just you couldn't have convinced me I would be here. But I'm happy with my path for sure.
And then having a single mom all these years, would it have made a difference if you actually had a father, you think?
Of course, I would be, it would be a totally different household. Again, not in like a different is bad way. It's just that would have been a different lived experience. So I would be different in some ways. Who knows? But
right, because there's people that
different.
say you have to have a mother and father in your household. I don't know if that's necessarily true. And again, I say I never judge people.
Well, not only that, but in today's modern world, statistically, that's not happening.
Right.
You know, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
How long have you known? I mean, how long have you had birthparentfinder.com or just your business? How long have you had your business?
This particular business since 2006.
All right, so since 2006. But you were PI well before that. Private
Started in
investigator.
1982.
All right. So was there ever a time where you were like, Uncle Jay will help me? Was there ever a time where you thought about coming to him and saying, I'm going to go ask Uncle Jay to help me, just figure some things out? And then as she thinks about that answer, I want you to answer first. Would you have helped her if she had asked? Because the whole don't answer it. Don't answer it. Okay. Was there ever a time you thought about asking Uncle Jay?
Tons. I still think about it. But it was never, again, compelling enough where I was like, I want to engage. I know you're busy. So I'm like, I am not compelled enough to engage on it. But of course, thought about it all the time. And I knew, I'm now making assumptions. So let's see what you say now in response to that question. But I always knew, like in the back of my head, if I ever wanted to know, I'd be able to know because I have Jay in my family.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it ever became that big a deal,
you could
always hit up. And you could. Now, would you have gone around your mom to do it, or would you have been like, okay, Mom, I'm going to Uncle Jay?
Oh, I would have told her.
Okay.
I also think, I haven't had this thought before, but with this question, because I always had it available to me, I think I was really balanced.
Right.
Again, I'm making a ton of assumptions that you would do it, but in the back of my head, I think I always knew I had the option as long as I understood what you were doing in your work and understood where I came from. It's like, if you tell a kid you can't smoke or drink alcohol, they're like, well, I really want to do that. I actually always had this option available to me, I think. And it no matter the actual answer to that, I think I had a really balanced perspective on it.
So let's say Annie, and she obviously didn't, had come to you at a much different period in her life and said, Uncle Jay, I want you to help find my donor father. What would you have said?
The first thing I would have done is ask your mom if that's okay.
Smart. Very smart.
And then if it was okay with her, I would have begun my search. But back then, we didn't have DNA, so I probably would not been able to find out anything.
So you would have hit roadblocks, legal roadblocks. The agency wouldn't have helped. There would have been like pound sand. And it's not like with adoption, there's certain things you can kind of work with, and you have the adoption or the birth registry, the proprietary information.
Right, that would not have been a factor.
Yeah, that would not have helped at all. So you would, if not for DNA, like today, you wouldn't have been able to help back then.
No, and if I used my proprietary information and I looked that up on a microfiche, it would have said your last name Ross.
Yeah.
Your birth mother's last name Ross.
So
that would be it.
Right. Wouldn't have been helpful at all. So as we move forward, let's close out this show with saying this. We have a special Patreon today. I think we do the Patreon after every show, but I think this show's is going to be really special because we're going to talk more about the donor father. I think there's some information. What's unique is you have an idea based on other people's findings of who your father is, but you seem to think that might be wrong.
Well, we got a few surprises.
Okay.
Wow.
So you're watching, and real quick, give us the Patreon information that's in front of you there.
So you go to patreon.com, Finding Family DNA. It's very simple. And subscribe.
Please do. I know that's a heck of a teaser and a heck of a cliffhanger to leave you on, but hopefully you've enjoyed learning about Annie Ross and her journey as I didn't really know how to, the way you phrased it, sperm donor baby, There's
no other way to put that.
I guess it's as simple as that. And there's nothing to be ashamed of.
I use different terminology all the time.
Well, what's funny? If you think about it, we're all sperm babies. So you just throw it in an extra word there.
You're not wrong.
Don't act prude to me, folks, right now. All right. Thank you for watching Finding Family DNA with Chris and Jay and Annie today. And be sure to check out our Patreon channel. We'll see you next time.
If you want exclusive bonus segments of these episodes, join our Patreon at patreon.com/findingfamilydna. And if you are looking to start the journey of finding your family DNA, just go to birthparentfinder.com. Thank you for joining us on Finding Family DNA.
chasing stars.